Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Simple Living High Thinking, where we unpack Tukaram Prabhu's Friday night Bhagavad Gita class. I'm joined by Tadeo Souza. Hi, Tadeo.
Haribo, Kim.
Haribol. We are beginning chapter 13. So, a whole new chapter. We concluded chapter 12 in one episode last week. So, what would you like to set up for chapter 13 today?
It is important to know that chapter 13 is the first chapter of the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. It is important to know that because traditionally our teachers have divided the Gita in 3 sections of 6 chapters. And the first section of 6 chapter is predominantly known as, let's say, karma yoga, the ways in which you act in the world aligned with the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. So there is a bigger emphasis on those points, like acting in the world, how to do your duty properly, etc., in the world, right? And so those 6 chapters are known as karma yoga, generally speaking. It is worthwhile to mention as well that karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga are present throughout the entire text, the entire Bhagavad Gita. But these 3 sections, if we were to look at them from a bird's eye view and identify a particular pattern, then yes, the first 6 chapters would be more karma like, meaning how you act in the world. And then the middle 6 chapters would be more bhakti like, meaning Krishna really takes the center stage and becomes the predominant deity, omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and we shall love him. So that's very bhakti like. So now our actions become actions that would please Krishna, not just how to act properly in the world, which is more karma yoga like, but also now these actions are directed towards Krishna, meant for Krishna's pleasure. So that would be the 6 middle chapters of the Gita. Now, starting in chapter 13, the thing here is Gyan Yoga, so which is to say knowledge. It's really about logic, philosophy, and understanding, knowledge, etc. Right? So we're really talking about philosophy here. And again, karma and bhakti is still present, but there is a big emphasis in knowledge. And so this is the first chapter where we're going to start focusing on knowledge and philosophy, philosophical knowledge, I guess you can say also. And it starts in a very suitable manner where our Christian Arjuna starts by asking questions. And Krishna answered those questions, and it starts off this last section of the Gita.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting that Tukaram Prabhu mentioned that sometimes people think this is an abrupt chapter where it doesn't seem to flow smoothly into how it starts out. So it's nice to have that setting, that background.
Right. Again, and it's in part because of that, there is a noticeable change in gears where
Mm-hmm.
we're no longer talking about loving Krishna and devoting our lives to Krishna, but now we're talking more, about the 5 elements of the universe and what exists, epistemology, phenomenology, etc. So these are more philosophical terms. So there's definitely that shift in gears. And it is all meant for the one purpose of bhakti. Ultimately, the entire Bhagavad Gita is about knowing Krishna and loving him. And I think it's quite suitable because we are here on planet Earth in material bodies. And as we are here, we should know how to act properly. So that's, let's say, karma yoga. Then we can now act for Krishna specifically. So that would be more bhakti yoga. But all that requires knowledge, because otherwise, how do you even know Krishna? How do you know how to act? How do you know what is what? How do you find your way in a very confusing time that we find ourselves today? By which knowledge are we being guided? So this knowledge, this philosophy that we're going to be discussing here, it isn't dry mental speculation. It is knowledge with a purpose. It is knowledge with the purpose to enhance our love for Krishna. As it is said in the Bible, to know him is to love him. And so perhaps one could make the philosophical arguments. How could you love somebody that you don't know? And so the more that you know a person, in this case, the supreme person, the more you can love him. And so this part of the Gita of knowledge, again, is knowledge of Krishna. And so it's in that sense, there is a shift of gears, but we should know that it remains connected to Krishna.
Okay. All right. Well, how should we start out the chapter text?
Well, let's talk about what are the questions that Arjuna asked, and let's see what Krishna will do. So text 1 and 2, Arjuna said, "My dear Krishna, I wish to know about nature, the enjoyer, and the field, and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." So these are the questions that Arjuna asked. And then right away, Krishna answers quickly. The Supreme Personality of God had said, "This body is called the field. And one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." So there's two answers to two of the questions, because Arjuna says, I wish to know about nature and the field, or nature, the enjoyer, and the field, the knower of the field. And Krishna says, the field is the body. And one who knows the body is the knower of the field. So simple, well, I shouldn't say simple, profound, but yet simple answers to these questions. So perhaps we can expand on that a little bit now. So what do we mean by the field? Are we talking about corn crops field, field that we do agriculture? No, we are talking about the body, because like Arjuna said, I want to know what is the field. But the way in which Krishna answers this question gives us the clue of what did Arjuna mean by that question. Because, if you say, what is the field? Like, well, what do you mean? Like, what kind of field? But then, but Krishna takes it that, well, it is the body, that the field is the body. So the way in which Krishna answers that question, it gives us an insight of what did Arjuna really mean by the field. Because remember, this is a conversation between great friends. In fact, they're also cousins. Krishna and Arjuna are cousins, but also great friends. And so there is a certain relationship and way that they're speaking to each other. So when Arjuna says, hey, what is the field? Krishna knows what he means by that, right? It takes us a little bit unpacking from our end, but that is the clue, because Krishna says, oh, the field is the body. And the knower of the field, and there is a soul inside of the body, and that soul knows the body. What does that mean? It means that if you put your fingers on fire, you're going to feel pain. It's going to get like really, really hot, and you're going to know that. Well, who is it that knows that? Who is that knower of the field? If the body is the field, then who is the knower of the field? Well, it is the soul inside of the body, that which is spiritual. That knower of the body is the soul inside of the body, right? So then Krishna answers quickly by saying, the Supreme Personality of God has said, this body is the field, and one who knows the body is called the knower of the body. That's us, the soul inside of the body. Does that make sense so far, Kim?
Yeah, so Krishna's kind of breaking down the difference between the separation between the body and soul.
Correct. He's going to give a more explicit on that breakdown very soon here. We're going to be covering those texts also. But I think it's a very interesting thing to talk about the body being the field, because if you think about agriculture, and let's say we have a field and we are cultivating something in that field, well, there are boundaries, and you are limited to those boundaries. You have a certain space within which you can work, and inside of that space, let's say you own it, it's your field, and you can do kind of like what you wish with it. You can plant what you can cultivate in that field, whatever it is you like. There are limits to it, and you live and you are inside of that field, right? I think this is a very interesting analogy because it really captures the position of the soul inside of the body. Because what do you choose to cultivate is essentially what you pay attention to, the contents of your mind, right? And you can literally cultivate your body as if it was a field. You can take a step back and think, okay, what is it that I'm going to grow here? What is this field going to look like? So I think it's a very interesting comparison to call the body the field, and the knower of the body, he who knows the body is the knower of the body, and that knower of the body is the soul. With the simple example I gave, if you pinched your toes, you feel it. Your knees, you feel it. Your stomach, you feel it. Your shoulders, your head, your ears, your nose, your eyes. You're aware of all of these. So this is the field that you are occupying, that you are currently aware of.
Oh, I did not realize that analogy. That's a great example of, yeah, what do you want to cultivate in that field?
Right. And then Krishna continues by saying, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. And to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. So that's Krishna saying that. This is a very interesting verse because Krishna not only answers yet another question, which is, what is knowledge? Because that was one of Arjuna's question, what is knowledge? And Krishna answers that question by saying, to understand this body, so the field that we just covered, and its knower, so the knower of the field, the soul inside of the body, that is called knowledge. To understand the body and its knower. What does that mean? To understand the body and its knower as being two different things. Not that I am the body or that I am the soul. Well, I am the soul, but not that I am the body and I have a soul, but that I am a soul and I am inside of the body. And so I am the knower of the field. So the body being the field, I am the knower of the field. And then Krishna says, knowledge means to understand the difference between the two. That who are you? Are you the body or are you the knower of the body? No, you are the knower of the body, not the body, right? You are the knower of the field, not the field. And to understand that, to understand this very point, that is what Krishna calls knowledge. So he answers yet another question that Arjuna asked, and he elaborates on the previous answers, which is the field is the body, and then there's the knower of the field. There's something else. It is not just the chemical processes of the brain, electromagnetism with some chemicals, which is essentially what our brains are. That is not what knows the body. It is the conscious being that is inside of the body that actually perceives all the different activities that are going on in the body, not just inert matter in the form of electromagnetism and chemicals. That is not what is aware of bodies, right? Like we can go into a thought experiment here, which would be very, very interesting. And Tukaram touched on this a lot. So let's say that indeed electromagnetism and chemicals are actually the consciousness that is aware of the field, in this case, the body. Well, then we can do a thought experiment that if I through my eyes, I know that is possible because I work closely with eye doctors. So if you do surgery in your neuro nerve, the optic nerve that goes into the brain. So let's say eye doctors, ophthalmologists, they can reach that part of your eye, which is called the optic nerve, which is essentially a path straight to your brain, and they can operate at that level. So let's say if we go in there and you collect a little sample of your chemicals that is present in your brain, and then now I inject that chemical in your brain. Well, the electromagnetism aspect of it is present in both my head and in your head. Does it now mean that I will be aware of your body in the same way that I am aware of my body? So let's say now if somebody puts fire on my toes, I will feel that. If somebody puts fire on your toes, will I feel that? I have the chemicals that were once in my brain is now in yours. Electromagnetism forces are present in both. So am I now aware of your body and the activities that are going on in your body? No, I am not. And so what is that then? It is not the chemicals and electromagnetism that makes me know my body. Because if that is what it was, then I could put a little bit of my chemicals on your body and then I would be aware of your body as well. So it is something yet different. It is the knower of the body is not any of the inert matter of the body. It is indeed the spiritual soul that is inside of the body, which is really who we are, that is the knower of the field. And then now Krishna then expands by saying that to understand that point, to understand this very point, that there is a field, the body, and then there is the knower of the field, the soul. To understand this very point, that is knowledge. And Krishna does yet something more interesting in this verse, which is to end by saying, that is my opinion. Krishna is a person, like we've been saying, and he has many, many qualities. And we're going to touch on these qualities coming up soon here. And this is his humble position. Krishna is God, so he could say, hey, that's what it is. He could say that, but he has this quality of being humble. He has humility. And so he says, you know what? That's my opinion. Well, we should take that very seriously because that's God's opinion. And it is a fact. It is an objective truth if God thinks so. But nevertheless, he's also displaying his humility by saying, hey, that is my opinion, right? And so I think this is a very interesting verse because it does so much, right? So first of all, it further expands on the field and the knower of the field by introducing that knowledge is this very understanding that there is a field and the knower of the field. And those two things are different. They are not the same. And that is knowledge. And that is God's opinion. That's how humble he is.
Yeah. I also thought that was interesting that it was phrased, this is my opinion. And
Right.
you bringing out the point of humility really explains why he would pose it in that way, phrase it in that way. So, yeah. And what he's talking about, it sounds so simple because, oh, the soul and the body. Most people today, except for perhaps atheists, but most people will acknowledge that, oh, yeah, there's the difference between the soul and the body, and then stop there. But if you take that conversation further, what are the implications of that? How do you live your life with this base knowledge? The whole idea, I don't want to take us too far from the text, but the idea of being spiritual but not religious. And what does that mean? So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a very, very interesting and appropriate topic to cover within these texts because like we mentioned, this is a section of the Gita where it's more philosophical, right? And if we're going to discuss philosophy, a very profound topic in philosophy is knowledge itself. Like, what is knowledge and what is there to know? I mean, there are branches of philosophy dedicated to these things. And how do I know? I know, right? Epistemology, etc. And so, what makes somebody who they are? If you say, I am spiritual, if you say, I am a Republican, if you say, I am a Democrat, I am whatever it is, whatever labels different groups give themselves, and then they identify themselves with that label. What is it that makes them that particular label? I would argue that it is a set of beliefs which came about through some specific knowledge. Well, you acquire knowledge of something, and then you accepted that knowledge as being true. And then you developed faith in that. You said, yeah, that's how it is. I have this knowledge, I accept it, and then now I'm going to live my life through these lenses of this particular knowledge. And that makes you that thing, that makes you part of that group. And so, if let me see if I can bring up my political knowledge a little bit here, not to deviate too much, but just to exemplify. If I am a Democrat, then I have some kind of knowledge that would cause me to firmly believe that society should be structured in a way that the focus is the middle class. Because if we have the middle class working and independence and being able to fulfill their needs, that is the vast majority of the people that are present in our society. And I'm talking about the United States only, right? And the focus should be there. Let's focus on the middle class, and then most people will be taken care of, and that will be a good society. Whereas a Republican knowledge that they have acquired, that they have stumbled upon, is that, well, no, let's focus more in the, let's say, richer class. Because by making sure that the people that are richer, let's say, are capable of conducting business in a very conducive manner where they're thriving, then that prosperity is going to trickle down to everybody else and is going to be spread among everybody. And in that way, society will be happy, let's say. So these are two different types of knowledge. There's one knowledge that through social science, the social science knowledge causes Democrats to believe that best would be to live life this way. Or the social science knowledge that Republicans accept as being truth is contrary. No, best is to live life in this other way. So hence, we have Democrats and we have Republicans. So well, then what makes you a Democrat and a Republican or a Republican? You to be that knowledge that you have acquired and accepted. And then now you act accordingly. So then now I'm acting as if the middle class should be giving more attention. I'm a Democrat. If I'm acting that the top should be facilitated, things for people at the top should be more facilitated, then I am a Republican, I'm a conservative, right? So it starts with that knowledge. You have a particular knowledge, you accept it as truth, and then you act accordingly. Then you are that thing. Well, if we expand that analogy and let's talk about the group of people that would say, I am spiritual, then what does that mean? What makes you spiritual? If we follow the same analogy here, then you would be that I have to have some kind of knowledge, and that knowledge convinced me that yes, that's what's good, that's what's true. This is a truthful piece of knowledge, and I now accept it as the ultimate truth, and I'm going to live my life like that, as if that was true. Krishna now here is saying that knowledge is to know, to understand the difference between the field and the knower of the field, which is to say the body and the soul. And if we accept that that is knowledge, and that I am not the body, that I am a soul, and then I act like that, I am therefore spiritual. That's what would make somebody a spiritual person, that set of knowledge that guides your actions. Aside, of course, from what that knowledge itself would give you, which is the understanding that you are the soul, spirit, the soul is spirit, and that indeed that is your identity. You could also say in that way that I am spiritual because that's who you are, and I am not matter. I am spiritual. So that's two ways of looking at the same thing. Nevertheless, that knowledge that allows you to recognize that you are spiritual makes you act in a spiritual way in the world. And in that sense, you can say, I am spiritual and not religious. Like, I accept that I am not this body, but I don't accept necessarily any particular religious doctrine. So then I am just spiritual, but not religious. But I've accepted that I am not this body, I am a soul. So that is a knowledge, that is knowledge that allows you to recognize that. But then there's also the fact that indeed you are the soul, and that soul is spirit by definition. And in that sense, you are also spiritual. But I would argue that most of us, trapped in material nature, trapped in a material body, trapped under hate, lust, and anger, and greed, that we haven't come to that profound realization that I am this soul, because we act with anger, greed, and lust. And that, because if we were indeed that self-realized spiritual soul, then we would have just love for the supreme person rather than acting in this lusty, angry, and greedy ways. And so I would argue that most people, like myself, who would say, I am spiritual, I am talking about my knowledge that I'm not this body, I'm a soul, and therefore I'm going to guide my actions. The lenses through which I see the world is that like I'm navigating life with that understanding. I'm not this body, I'm a soul, and therefore my values, my principles, my actions should be aligned with this knowledge.
Yeah, that's a very good distinction about knowing that with this knowledge that makes you spiritual, more on the spiritual side, but then what are your behaviors? I liked your point about most of us haven't come to that profound realization of the distinction between the soul and the body. Otherwise, our behaviors would be a little bit different. I noticed that, coming from, I used to do energy work and like Reiki and stuff like that. And in that culture, the whole spiritual but not religious is very prevalent. But when you look at why they do quote unquote spiritual things, it's always for manifesting in the material world. How to manifest a new car, a better house, a better job, a good relationship, a boyfriend or husband. And I would argue that, is that being spiritual? Yes, they have the knowledge of the difference between the body and the soul. But like you said, most people haven't really let the implications of that start to sink in. Of, if we had right in front of us this in 3D in our existence here on the planet, that Krishna is God, or that this life is so temporary. And if we had that in our face, we would all live very differently. That's why I kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy. It's that your thoughts dictate your feelings and your behaviors. And so when we look at our feelings and behaviors, like you mentioned, greed, lust, anger, and how we pursue everything in the material world, what is that indicating about our thoughts? Well, yes, on paper, we know that the difference between the soul and the body, but we're really not grasping that at a deep, profound level, like you said. So
that's a very interesting point, Kim. And I want to bring another analogy here and another concept. So the concept is the interim state. Like I'm deeply material. I'm covered by profound ignorance. I think I am this body. I get super angry. I get super greedy. I get super lustful, and all the implications of these three bad qualities and so on. Meaning, if you're very angry, anger is like at the bottom of it, right? So resentfulness, bitterness, jealousy, it's all a manifestation of anger, right? And then greed, like I want more and more, and I'm going to exploit people, and I just want more things. So it manifests in different ways. And lust, not just sexual, but also, really believing that there's this other body that I own and I can do with it whatever I wish, like slavery. Like I have such a lusty desires to have these people do as I wish, and I control their bodies and I do with their bodies whatever it is that I want, and all these different manifestations, right? So we can be very trapped in deep ignorance of these energies, and then we can come before this knowledge. Hey, but you know what, you're not any of that, you're something different, you're something more pure, you're something that is away from these bad qualities. So that's the medium state. How do you move from this point to the other point, which would be a self-realized, enlightened spiritual existence, right? So you are going to move from one to another, and it is a journey. And to what the point you made, yes, your actions should therefore reflect that knowledge, and you should be taking very small steps away from being trapped in material ignorance towards spirituality, being spiritual. And the analogy is that, let's say you are a fish, and then now you come out of the ocean. It's an interesting analogy, but bear with me. Hopefully it will make sense. Let's say you are a fish and you come out of the ocean, and then you're now living around and among human beings. And due to some deep ignorance, you forget the fact that you are a fish. And you are now thinking, again, due to ignorance, that you are a human being. Well, then you're gonna do the human being thing. You're gonna go to school, you're gonna get a degree, you're gonna get a job, you're gonna get married, you're gonna start a family, you're gonna fight, you're gonna do the human being thing. But all the while, you were a fish. You're just thinking that you were a human being. Well, if you then come across some knowledge that says, you know what? You're not a human being. You're not this body. You're actually a fish. You're something completely different. Once you have that knowledge, then what is the natural implication of that? Well, if I am a fish, then yes, I can't let go of my deep psychology, my deep human psychology right now. I can't just drop that and start being a fish. It's difficult work. So you're going to have to take step by step, but you have to take some steps. You're going to have to start being a fish, which means being in the spiritual in our case, right? But ultimately, the main implication of this analogy is that you don't belong where you are. You don't belong here on like outside of the ocean among human beings. You need to go back in the ocean. That's where you actually belong. And so your actions should be actions that would take you away from the land, let's say, and back into the ocean, because that's where you belong. And so if the activities that you're engaging in are labeled as spiritual, but they are simply providing you with a better human experience, then it begs the question, is that really spiritual? It is not. So the fish with the knowledge, I am a fish. Okay, I can't just drop my human psychology. I'm going to have to start acting in a way that more and more I'm okay leaving my apartment. Maybe I just leave my apartment and I go to the beach and I just hang out there with other people that are at the beach. There's very interesting because you see people that go there once a year when it's really hot at the beach, that is. You can see other people that kind of go every weekend, but never really get in the water. But then you can see the surfers that are even during the winter time at 5 in the morning, they're there surfing. Like they're more like a fish than we are. So you can gradually make your steps, but your actions would be to start getting more comfortable with the ocean and away from your, you know, skyscraper lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
More towards the ocean, and then little by little you can now go into the ocean and completely let go of your human psychology and fully embrace your fish psychology, which means you're going into the ocean and away from the city. So that's what we mean here. If you are spiritual, then your actions would be actions that takes you away from your human psychology towards your spiritual existence, and your actions would have to mirror that. Not that you can simply say, oh, I'm spiritual and I'm doing all these spiritual things, and by doing all these spiritual things I got a new husband or a new wife, and by doing all these spiritual things I got a new job. That's not spiritual, that's material. That's you just staying as a fish among human beings, but you are a happier human being, but you're still a fish. That no, your actions should be, I got to go away from here towards the ocean.
Yeah, so then the question becomes how to be more spiritual.
At this part of the Gita is about knowledge. You acquire some knowledge, considering what we are saying. You are not this body. You are the knower of the field, but you are not the field. Let's consider that knowledge. Let's contemplate that and see if it holds any water. I gave a few examples, right? Thought experiments. If I am the field, if the sense of I is derived from my body alone, and when the body dies, is the end of the I, is the end of my existence, then I am the body. And if I am the body, the closest the science has come to these days would be to elaborate on the chemical processes of our neurology in the brain, along with electromagnetism. That would be it. That's what gives rise to consciousness. Hence, the thought of I, the sense of existence, is nothing but chemicals and electromagnetism. In fact, that's what they say. Shamelessly, atheist scientists says just that consciousness is chemicals interactions. Well, that's preposterous because I just said, take some of the chemicals out of my brain, put it in your brain. Does that mean that I'm now aware of the activities of your body? It does not. So I am not that. And so you get some knowledge of who you are. These eternal philosophical questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? And where do I go? This is beyond the Bhagavad Gita. This is beyond psychology. This is beyond religion. These are questions that human beings have been asking themselves since time immemorial. Who am I? Why am I here? Where do I go after here? And what is the purpose of me being here? These are very deep questions. So to answer your question, Kim, how do I start making those? How do I take those steps towards being spiritual? In this section of the Gita, it's about knowledge. Develop some knowledge about who you are. You are the knower of the field, not the field. And I guess it begs for us to move forward. Let me read the next text. Krishna says on text, let's see, what is it? Text, you know, that I,
Text 4?
when Krishna says, I am also the knower in all bodies, what text is that?
Oh, that's text 3.
Yeah, that's text 3, right? Yeah. Yes, Krishna says, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. Now that implies, it doesn't imply, it directly states that there is you, the knower of your body, but then there is Krishna, who is the knower of all bodies. What does that mean? It means that there's some similarities between you and this other knower, in the sense that you are capable of knowing a body. But this other knower, who is Krishna, knows all bodies. Well, that's quite interesting. That's a quite interesting statement here. Because like I said, I cannot know your body. Your experiences of your body is in the first person, is subjective to you alone. I may say, hey, if you're having a bad day, I say, oh, Kim, yes, I know how you feel. No, I don't know how you feel. I have an idea of how you may feel, but I don't actually know how you feel because I am not in your body. So I am limited by my field. My activities pertains to my field alone. And that's all that I'm capable of knowing. And I am not this body. I'm the knower of the body. Well, there is another knower who knows my body, your body, and everyone's body, every other living entity's body as well. Well, that's a huge implication because that person must know a lot. If knowledge is to know the difference between the body and the soul, and this knower knows the difference between everybody's bodies and souls, then what would automatically make him omniscient? He has all knowledge. Well, isn't omniscience one of the aspects of God? Yes, it is. And isn't knowledge and manifestation of power? Yes, it is. Knowledge is power. If you have all knowledge, then there's one aspect of power that you have absolutely that would start putting you in a path towards omnipotence, where you'd be all powerful. Also, if I have knowledge of what's going on in my body, like my mind, let's say, all the experiences I have had, then I know quite a few things. I've been around for 43 years. I've been in multiple countries. I met different people. I got a degree. I work. I know very small, but something. And so do you, Kim. And so does everybody else. Well, if there is another knower who is in everybody's bodies and knows all these experiences in the same way I know my own, but this other knower knows everybody else's too, even the contents of their minds, their past, their presence, and their fears and hopes of the future, then that is pointing that knower towards omniscience. So now we got another way in which we can start being spiritual. I'm not this body. I know only this body. There is another knower who is all knowledgeable because they know all because that knower knows all bodies, and he has a lot of power because he has the power to know all these other bodies, and that is Krishna. So wouldn't that be an interesting person to know? That would be a very interesting person to know. So this knowledge alone is sufficient for us to start taking steps towards towards being spiritual. How can I be spiritual? Know who you are. Know that just like you, but even better than you, there's another knower who is God, and that you should take interest in that knower, not things of this material world, which comes up in another text here as well. In text 13, I'm jumping around a little bit. We'll go back, but it's very suitable for this point in time of our discussion. Text 13, Krishna says that I shall now explain the knowable. So what is to be known? That was another question that Arjuna asked. Krishna says, I shall now explain the knowable. If you have knowledge, then what do you do with that knowledge? Or you're going to know something. What is the most worthy thing of knowing? Krishna says, I shall now explain that, which is worthy of being known with your knowledge. And Krishna says, knowing which you would taste the eternal. That worthy thing of being known that would allow you to taste the eternal is Brahman, spirit. That is like spiritual. It's not matter, it's spiritual, which is beginningless and is subordinate to me, meaning it is my energy. It's like spirit itself is Krishna's energy. And it lies beyond the causes and effects of this world, which means is very contrary to everything that we have experienced in this world, because everything in this world is bound by cause and effect, the laws of cause and effect. But this spirit, this Brahman, which is subordinate to Krishna, who is actually in quality the same as we, because we are spiritual, that is worthy of knowing. That is where we should project our knowledge. That is worthwhile knowing. So with all this knowledge, with this knowledge of body and spirit, and that what's worthy knowing is spirit, then it really takes me to a place where, all right, I think that knowledge is to know that I am the soul, not a degree from Harvard, a law degree from Harvard. And that what's worthy knowing is that spirit, that Krishna, not which stock to invest next and therefore make most money. Now I am being spiritual. That's what it means. How can you become spiritual? Develop this knowledge, understand this knowledge, act accordingly. That's how you become spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really like that verse, text 13, how it says his phrasing of which you will taste the eternal. I like Tukaram Prabhu's point of how, with your thought experiment, that makes it so clear about, okay, even if you take some of the chemicals or how you phrased it, to try to put it into another person's body, you still will not be able to know their experience. And so, but we can get an idea, a generalized idea of what their experience might be like. If we've ever burned our finger and then they burn their finger, we kind of know. And so it's kind of encouraging, this text, that Krishna says, you can taste the eternal. You can start to get a little bit of an idea of what Krishna is like, what it might be like beyond this world. And I like that idea. That's good enough for me, of knowing that, yeah, I'm never going to understand it, but fully, but to be able to have these glimpses and these tastes of the eternal is very encouraging to me.
Yeah, there's a sense in which there's a big predominant sense in which bona fide spirituality, bona fide religion is extremely pessimistic, because Krishna would say in Bhagavad Gita, from the top of the spiritual planets to the bottom of the hellish planets, being that we are on earthly planets, which is right in the middle, right? It's not as good as heavenly planets, but it's not as bad as hellish planets. These are the three planetary systems according to Vedic cosmology. Krishna says from the top of the spiritual planets, from the top of the heavenly planets, all the way down to the bottom of the hellish planets. So that covers all of creation. That's why Krishna phrased it that way. He said, from the top of the heavenly planets to the bottom of the hellish planets, these are all places of misery where repeated birth and death are taking place. That sounds to me like extremely pessimistic. Like even if I am in heaven, it is a place of misery. It's like is that what it means to be spiritual? To look at the world and think that this is a place of misery? Being spiritual means I'm cool. I'm in the lights. I'm in the white lights that is peaceful and energetic, whatever it may be. Not really well defined in neo spirituality, but not that. Not that, oh, it's a place of misery and this is just suffering. Like Buddhism. Buddhism is rooted in Buddha's Four Noble Truth. That is the bedrock of Buddhism, the Buddha's Four Noble Truth. What's noble truth number one? All life is suffering. So there's a sense in which bona fide religions and spiritual traditions are very, very pessimistic. Buddha says all life suffering. Krishna says from the top to the bottom is all a bunch of places of miseries. So that's a lot of pessimism. Is that what being spiritual means? No. To your point, Kim, which I think is very, very interesting, being spiritual automatically means that we are so extremely optimistic of our actual position, which is eternal, that we even believe that we can defeat death, that even death is not enough to kill us, and that ultimately the human spirit survives death and goes to a place where eternally, that's what this verse is saying, you're going to taste the eternal, where eternally you're going to live a relationship of ever expanding love, bliss, and knowledge, and that you even defeat the human death and you are transcendental to that. There's nothing that can be more optimistic than that. So it is a very interesting point because it says he allows us to taste the eternal. But yes, that which is eternal is not that which is material. Like in Christianity, there's a saying, right? Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Well, you're going to have to let go of your human existence, which is material, and truly taste the eternal, which is spiritual. So nothing is more optimistic than that. We can actually taste the eternal, you know, but yes, we have to let go of the material, which we are not anyways.
Yeah. And at the end of our lives, we'll be forced to give up the material.
Right.
So
Another very, I would actually argue that so far, out of all the topics that we have discussed, this next topic that I want to introduce by going over text 8 through 12 is perhaps the most powerful one. And here's the reason why. We are talking about knowledge. We are talking about that which is worthy of knowing. We're talking about the field and the knower of the field. That's good. I mean, that's great. That is fantastic. But nevertheless, it requires you to have knowledge. It requires you to understand what is the most worthy object of knowledge. It requires you to have that knowledge. So the question is, well, then, well, how do I acquire the knowledge? Because I know if I want to be a prominent, respectful lawyer, I know how to acquire that knowledge. I go to Harvard and I get a law degree. That's how I acquire the knowledge. If I want to become a brain surgeon, if I want to become a doctor, I go to some med school of some respectable university and I acquire the knowledge that way. Well, if we are talking about spiritual knowledge, the topics that we are discussing here today, how do I acquire the knowledge? It is difference. There's a difference between understanding what is knowledge and what is the most worthy object to know, and how do I acquire that? I can say, well, to become a lawyer, to become a prominent lawyer, you need a law degree. Well, how do I do that? Well, you go to Harvard. Okay. Well, to acquire this spiritual knowledge, what do you do? Now, okay, I got it. Like, I see where it's pointing to. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. But how do I acquire that? How can I drop my human psychology and realize that I am a fish and go back to the ocean? How do I actually do that? Right? And that's what text 8 through 12 expands upon. So I'm going to read that quickly, and then we will expand on that. So text 8 through 12. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglements with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, Krishna, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All this I declare to be knowledge. And besides this, whatever there might be is ignorance. Is what Krishna says. So our teachers have expanded and I want to say clarify, but Krishna does not need to be clarified because it's clear enough. But I just want to make a point in case it wasn't so clear. Humility isn't knowledge. Pridelessness isn't knowledge. These qualities, these topics that were discussed on text 8 through 12, these are the means by which you acquire knowledge. These are the things that if you embrace and partake on, the result, the results of which will be you having knowledge. So this is how you cultivate knowledge. This is how you gain knowledge. If you want to be a very reputable lawyer, yes, go to Harvard and get a law degree from there. If you want to become spiritual, number one, you must develop some humility. You must become humble. Because let's analyze that, see if that makes any sense. What do we really know, right? As a human being, you can have degrees from this university and that university and many, many other universities and wrote a book and people think you're good. Okay, then I'm going to ask you, give all your knowledge and prevent the people whom you love from dying. Can you do that? No, you cannot. Prevent yourself from dying. Can you do that? No, you cannot. Predict what the weather is going to be like in a month from now. Can you do that? No, you cannot. So what do we really know? Like, what is consciousness? Does anybody know that on the planet today? The most predominant scientist or whomever it may be, ask them, what is consciousness? They will tell you, we do not know. So what is it that we really know? Like, we can have this degree, you can have this money, that money. You can be, let's say, Donald Trump, because presidents usually are not the richest people around. They have a lot of power, but they don't have that much money. Donald Trump, allegedly, it's interesting why he never really showed his tax returns, but allegedly, he's a rich man, rich businessman. So let's say he has money, and he was the most powerful person in the world at one point when he was president of the United States. So here's a person who is rich, has a lot of money, and has the most power. Okay, what does he really know? Can he prevent his beloved people from dying? Can he prevent himself from getting old and getting diseased? Could he prevent himself from getting coronavirus? No, he could not, because he got it. And so what do we really know? What is really knowledge here, right? We don't really know much. No matter how high our position seems to be in material existence, we don't really know much. We don't even know what consciousness is. We don't even know where we came from. We don't even know where we go from here. And so we don't really know much. But if we walk around thinking, oh, I know this because I got a degree on that, or I know this other thing because I wrote a book on it. If we walk around like that, that means we are very prideful. That means we are very puffed up, that we think we know, but we don't know. And again, we've been saying Krishna is a person, and he's a very intelligent person. He's the most intelligent person. And all knowledge comes from Krishna. We cover in text in chapter 10, Krishna says, those who are dedicated to me, I will give them the knowledge by which they can come to me. It is not your own knowledge, it's Krishna's knowledge to begin with, and Krishna is the one who gives it to you. And he's a person. And as a person, he knows whether you want knowledge or whether you think you already have knowledge. If you walk around thinking, I know everything, I'm a very prideful man or woman because I have this degree, that degree, or this position or that position, Krishna will not interfere with your free will because you're thinking you have knowledge and that knowledge is great. And that's all the knowledge that I want. And I'm the most knowledgeable. I'm the wisest person there is. And you're puffed up and you're super prideful. Krishna will say, okay, then that is your desire. Then keep this little minute knowledge that you have. And I am not going to give you any other real knowledge, spiritual knowledge, knowledge of who you are, where do you come from, and how do you become eternal. That is real knowledge. Krishna is not going to give you that because he knows that you are enjoying thinking that you have whatever kind of material knowledge you have. And so that is why this is number one on this list: humility. Understand that you don't know anything. We don't know anything. We don't know how to keep ourselves from getting old. We don't know how to keep ourselves from dying. And we don't even know how we took birth. Like, where did we come from? We were forced to be in this body. If we are not the body, but the soul, and we now find ourselves in these bodies, how did that happen? Who forced me in here? I suddenly find myself in this body. By which process am I being forced to be in this body? By which process do I go to sleep at night, seemingly go to some other plane of existence that's called the dream, and then I come back in the morning and I wake up and back I am in this body? By which process is that taking place? We don't know any of that. And so to understand that we don't know much is to become humble. That's how you cultivate humility, by understanding how much we actually don't know. And I went by citing the person that Western culture considers to be the wisest person who has ever lived, and that is Socrates. In Socrates' trial, he was asked, well, the oracle believes that Socrates is the wisest person alive. Is that true? Socrates was asked that question. Are you the wisest person? Are you the most knowledgeable person alive? And he says, yes, I'm the wisest, most knowledgeable person alive because I know that I don't know anything. And all you other people are very dumb because you think you know everything. So his actual knowledge was his humility, to know that he didn't know anything. And that's aligned with this step number one in acquiring knowledge: humility. We need help. We need Krishna's help to actually give us real knowledge, knowledge that can take us beyond death, knowledge that can allow us to recognize who we are, eternal spirit souls, not this temporary field of material activities.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for highlighting that importance. First of all, how these qualities are not knowledge itself, because that could easily get misconstrued. And also humility being front and center, first on the list, how that can play out in your search for knowledge. So yeah, I love how specific texts 8 through 12 are. Like, you can't really get more specific than that. Oh, you want to know how to be more spiritual? Here, this is how you start in order to get more knowledge. So we have no excuses for not having a roadmap, at least, for what should be our goals.
I love that point. No excuses for not having a roadmap. Like, it's not a secret. You know, there was a popular movie, like neo spiritual movie, talking about the secret. It is not a secret. We're talking about it right here on YouTube. It's public, and it's in podcasts, YouTube, all the channels in which this simple living and high thinking topics can be found. So it's not a secret. So the name of our podcast, right? Simple living and high thinking. Yeah, simple living, because we're not interested in that which is material. It is a complex living. If you want to have this big car and this big this and this big that, that's very complex, because you're going to have to be fighting. You're going to be in the rat race, swimming with the sharks, competing, and it's very complex. But no, we are truly spiritual. We know our material life is simple because we are dedicating our brain power to that which is spiritual. And so it's a simple living in high thinking, and it's not a secret. There's a roadmap here, and nobody can have that excuse that, well, I don't know how to do it. First of all, become humble. Understand that you don't know much. That's how you become humble. Be aware of all the things that you do not know, all the things that you cannot control, and everybody around you. Even the topmost scientists do not know how to prevent anybody from getting older or dying or getting diseases or stopping the corona pandemic. And pridelessness, drop your pride. You know, there's like an immense universe out there. There's 7 billion of us in the human life. Like, our pride of what happened to me last week, or what I didn't get and I should have gotten, is just about your pride. Drop your pride, become humble, become nonviolent, That's the other point here, right? Non-violence. Stop killing animals unnecessarily to eat them. We don't need the protein is a myth. It's we have enough protein from plant-based foods. So what are you left with? What other arguments are we left with for eating meat? If it's not the physiological need of protein, then what is it? The whimsical taste of your tongue? Does that justify inflicting pain on animals? It does not. It causes you cancer. So it's a dumb decision, anyways. And so, non-violence, right? Let's refrain from causing violence. Tolerance. We cannot control other people around us. You're going to want to be spiritual, but everybody around you want to see the Kardashians or the NFL or something else. You need to tolerate that impulse of the other thing that happens in this text, detachment from the general mass of people. The general mass of people are not interested in spirituality. They are interested in things of the world, material things. We detach ourselves from such people and we try to surround ourselves with people who have this spiritual knowledge and act accordingly. Simplicity. Again, align with the very title of what we're doing here. Simple living and high thinking. Live in a simple way so that you can think very highly about these topics with the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, which is the next item here, approaching a bona fide spiritual master because they know this knowledge and we don't. A bona fide spiritual master can give us that knowledge. Cleanliness of body, but also mind. We control our lusty impulses and our greed desires. Cleanliness of the body and the mind. Steadiness, so that it is not easy to be spiritual. Are you going to give up? Like, oh, I tried to be spiritual for 3 weeks, didn't work out, so back to the nonsense. No, you're steady in your endeavors and you have self-control. It is not easy. It is simple, but it is not easy. So you control yourself, you understand who you are, and you maintain on the path. You renounce the objects of sense gratification. Why? Because sense gratification due to material objects is going to keep you doomed to have a material existence because you derive your so-called happiness, although temporarily, through material objects. And that's not going to help you. And so you detach yourself from objects of the sense gratifications. Absence of false ego. What does it mean, false ego? I'm this body. Well, true knowledge is for you to know that you're not this body. You are the knower of the body. So let go of your false ego. That is the power of the false ego. I am this body. I am this person. I am this husband. I am this employee. I am this boss. That's your false ego. Your true ego is I am an eternal lover of Krishna. The perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. Prabhupada, our main spiritual master, he would say, even if our society can solve all of our sociological problems, all of our economic problems, all of our ethical problems, even if we were able to solve all of these problems and we are living in a perfect society, guess which problem we cannot solve? The problem of death. If unemployment rate was zero, if inflation didn't exist, if Democrats and Republicans got along, if blacks and whites and Asians and Hindus and Muslims and Christians and Jews, if we all got along, if there was world peace, even if that was the case, guess what happens about 90 years or so? You're going to die. Guess what's going to happen amidst this such perfect society? You're going to get a disease of some sort and you're going to die. And there's no escaping that. And so we need to be aware of that fact. We need to perceive the evil in death, perceive the evil in old age and in disease. It is difficult to perceive the evil in old age if you are between 13 and 25, or let's say between 13 and 30. It is very difficult to perceive the evil in old age. But when you get about your 45 to 50 to 60, you start getting a glimpse of what old age actually means. But it is not until you are about 75-ish to 85-ish that you're really going to know what is it like to be in a decaying body. That's what entropy does. It will move your material body from an orderly state to a state of chaos. That's old age. Your body's going to disintegrate on you while you still occupy it. That's old age. So we need to be aware of that and go back to eternality where we came from. Detachment, right? From material things. Hey, I do like karma yoga, first 6 sections of the Bhagavad Gita. Do your duty and don't worry about the results. Just do your duty and detach yourself from the results. Freedom from the entanglements with children, wife, home, and the rest. Is Krishna urging us not to get married and have wives and children? No, he's not. He's talking about entanglements. As we know, a lot of the entanglements that we experience today will come from your own family. Most of your troubles, generally speaking, I would say, not everybody, but generally speaking, most of your sufferings and your troubles will come from the people in your own family. And so freedom from entanglements with children, wife, home, and the rest. Learn how to get along. Learn how to build a happy home. It's worth it. You're going to be in it for many decades. So might as well learn how to get along with your spouse and your children and learn how to live as harmoniously as possible. So freedom from the entanglements with children, wife, home, and the rest. Even mindedness amidst pleasant and unpleasant events. Why? Because you can't control it. If it's summertime on a Friday afternoon when you're happy, that's great. But what's going to happen when it's winter time on a Monday morning? You're depressed. Is that a good way to live? No, it's not. And so, so even mindedness amongst pleasant and unpleasant events. Be cool when it's Friday summertime. Be cool when it's Monday wintertime. You even minded. Constant and unalloyed devotion to Krishna. To me, that's the ultimate, right? You know who you are, you know who Krishna is, and you serve him eternally. Constantly and an unalloyed devotion to Krishna. Aspiring to live in a solitary place. That goes along with detachment from the general masses of people. What does that mean? Most people are not really interested in spiritual topics. Most people are interested on who Kim Kardashian will marry next, or what is the next hot stock to invest in, or when can I travel again without a mask. So most people are interested in these topics. So we're not. We're different. We are more like solitary in the sense that it's much fewer people that are spiritual minded than people that are not. So in that sense, you live in a solitary place because you're going to find very few people there, not the masses of people. Accepting the importance of self-realization. According to our philosophy, you are an eternal being. If you are trapped in material existence, you're going to have many, many incarnations. And every incarnation is going to present the same old birth, same old age, same disease, and same death. Do you want that? Millions and millions of times in other types of bodies, like animal body, pig body, ant's body, cockroach body, maggot body. Is that something you're looking forward to? If it's not, then accept the importance of self-realization. Let's get out of here and never come back. In philosophical search for the absolute truth, that's exactly what we're doing right now in the beginning of this chapter, chapter 13. Philosophical search for the absolute truth. We are the knower of our bodies. It's quite limited, but we know our body. There is another knower who knows all bodies. That's philosophy. Let's get to the bottom of that philosophy. What does that mean? There's God. He exists. So do we. We have some things in common. Let's search for him philosophically, aligned with our actions. And all of these things, if we do them, we're going to acquire true spiritual knowledge. And anything else we may do outside of this, according to the Supreme Person, is nothing but ignorance.
Yeah, yeah. I love the last sentence there. First of all, the phrasing of the search for the absolute truth, it really indicates our free will in the matter. And the earlier verse where Krishna said, oh, that's just my opinion. He's really giving us, it's the onus is on us to make a choice. And everything is a choice. People tend to, especially in our Western culture here, people tend to think that they're victims of circumstance. They're a victim of their thoughts. Like, I can't control my thoughts or my anxiety, but everything is a choice. You have a choice in what you believe about yourself. You have a choice in what you believe about the world, about God. And in the search for the absolute truth, it's important for people to vet the tradition that they're searching for. Tukaram Prabhu gave a wonderful class last night here in Long Beach, California, where he talked about the idea of commitment and committing to a tradition where it's not going in with blind faith, but you vet them. You ask them the questions of what are their beliefs about God, what are their beliefs about the self and the world, and how do all those things, those three things, relate to each other. And to ask the tough questions. Don't just accept things in blind faith. And that's what I really appreciate about this tradition is no one has ever shied away from the tough questions. The problem of evil, what is consciousness? What are we doing here? And that to me speaks to the bona fide nature of this tradition. It's well thought out. It's very logical. And even in the Gita here, how texts 8 through 12 are so specific. There's no nuance there. There's some, but it's very straightforward that anyone can choose to adopt. And so when you think about what you actually believe, I've found, since finding Krishna consciousness, I've found that so many questions, my questions, and reservations and issues in life can be answered by simple questions. Do I actually believe in an all good God? Because so many questions can be answered by saying yes. And it's been enlightening to me and kind of embarrassing to me at times to break down my issue and think, oh, do I believe in an all good God? No, maybe some remnants of my Christian upbringing are conflicting with that idea. And when I actually step into the idea of, oh, I do believe in an all good God. And yeah, that's my question, my issue seems ridiculous in light of that. And so here, do you believe in the soul versus the body? Well, do you really believe that? Because then how are you cultivating your field? A lot can be indicated by our actions. We can all say what we want, sound good on paper, but our actions betray us at times. They really indicate where our thoughts and our beliefs are. And we have the choice to believe whatever we want. So I love these texts that we're going over today.
You said it so nicely. I don't want to comment on it.
Well, we're towards the end of our episode today. Is there any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yes, stay tuned for the next episode.
Big cliffhanger.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you today. I really enjoyed spending this time with you. I always love talking about the Gita with you.
Thank you, Kim. Likewise. Same here.
Yeah. All right. And we will see you again, not next week, but the week after. So, Haribol.
Haribol.